Yeah, what about it?
Uh, which of these 7 evolutions are we talking about?
I have no idea what that could possibly mean. They're all I don't know of any of them that aren't true, so
Well, you got biological evolution.
yep, there you go, that's true.
Yep, the origin of life.
That's not evolution.
Evolution doesn't include the origin of life?
Nope.
Really?
Yep.
What does evolution include?
Evolution is the differential survival rate and reproductive success of organisms that leads to changes within a population and eventually speciation and all that kind of stuff. Abiogenesis isn't evolution.
Interesting. I was originally told by evolutionists that there's 7 different types of evolution, starting with cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, and matter.
Right, that's astronomy. It's not biology. Evolution by natural selection is a biological mechanism. It has nothing to do with astronomy. There wouldn't be life if there wasn't a universe and a planet Earth that has biogeochemical systems that produce the molecules that are associated with life, but they're not the same thing.
Interesting. So evolution is, I'm going to ramble here for about 3 seconds, the process of I messed up. Tell me, biological evolution?
You take all the time you want.
Okay. Biological, the evolution of simple-celled organisms to man? Is that what we're talking about?
I mean, it didn't go in that order, but yeah, sure.
Okay. So is the fossil record, discovery of fossils, a major point of evidence in the evolution, theory, evidence, etc.?
A lot of people say it is the single largest piece or single most significant piece of evidence. But genetics is also incredibly strong. I mean, for centuries, people were looking at the anatomies of animals and being able to tell which ones are most similar, and then therefore almost certainly the most closely related. And then guess what? The genetics bore that out exactly the way it was predicted. That's how you know your scientific model is true, when it makes predictions that are accurate and that come true time after time after time after time again.
So life started simple in single-celled organisms, and over time evolved.
Go ahead.
Over time evolved into complex-celled organisms, eventually into humans. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's like 3.5 billion years between the beginning of that and then the human part. I mean, the first life. So the deal with a species evolving, the deal with life first appearing on planet Earth is it doesn't just happen all of a sudden. In fact, it is such an unbelievably gradual process that it never actually happens in one instant. So we know that birds evolved from dinosaurs. It's not the case that one day a dinosaur laid an egg and inside of that egg was a bird. It is so gradual that it never actually just happens all at once. And it would be the same story with the first life that appeared on the planet. And that's kind of a weird concept, but it makes sense. You can do all kinds of thought experiments to be like, oh yeah, okay, that actually sort of does make sense. And we can look at real world examples too.
Gotcha. So fossils, right?
Right.
So bones in the ground, skeletal remains, basically dead animals. Scientists, evolutionists have looked at fossils and studied them and said, "Hey, look at this fossil, and look at these fossils," and we conclude through various studies that over time, evolution has occurred, and there's change that has evolved. I'm completely, summarizing everything, but basically, fossils, study, and we get to this complex teaching of the fossil record. All right, you tracking?
Yeah.
Okay. So me and you, we go to a area and we find bones in the ground, right?
Right. Right. Hello? I can't hear you anymore.
Okay. All right, so we find bones in the ground.
Yes.
Right? And I'm sorry. Someone's trying to call me. I say to you, the only thing that we know when we find these bones is that something died. We do not know if these bones had offspring, and we certainly can't conclude that these fossils and bones had different or evolved offspring. Do you agree?
So the way you're thinking about evolution is like in a linear perspective. One animal gives birth to another animal that's slightly different, that gives birth to another animal that's slightly different. But in reality, the way evolution by natural selection works is it propagates over large populations. So what the individual represents is the individual is sort of a good model for the entire population. And so an individual represents not the entire gene pool, but like usually like a pretty good average of the genetic makeup of that population. So it doesn't matter if that individual that died didn't reproduce, because it's genetically incredibly similar to all the other individuals in its population. And for sure, certain members in that population do reproduce and keep reproducing. And then slowly over time, differences accumulate.
Mm-hmm. So over time, evolution teaches that single-celled organisms through millions of years, fossil record, organisms evolve over time, and eventually we get to humankind.
Well, now, every organism, not just humans.
But I state to you that when we find bones in the ground, fossils, the only thing that we can conclude is that it died. We cannot prove that it had offspring. We cannot. We find bones in the ground. We cannot say that organism had babies.
It doesn't matter if that one particular one had babies or not. Members of its species did.
How do you know that?
Because it exists. Every single organism that exists because its parent gave birth to it.
Correct. Its parent, which looked like them, looked like that offspring, gave birth to them. But we cannot prove that those bones in the ground had offspring, and we certainly can't conclude or prove that organism, those bones in the ground, had different or evolved offspring. There's no way you can prove that. Do you agree?
Yes, we totally can. So when you look at the fossil record, what you find is you agree that dinosaurs don't exist anymore, right?
Correct.
You agree that during the time of dinosaurs, humans did not exist, right?
No comment.
Okay, well, we didn't. We know that for a fact. So either you have to believe that life is being spontaneously created, magically, supernaturally, something, over the eons, or the organisms that exist in the present day are the descendants of different forms of organisms in the past. I mean, if you think that Adam and Eve walked side by side with dinosaurs, then you and I don't exist in the same reality, and there's really nothing, there's no fruit that's going to come from this conversation.
That's besides the point.
Well, no, it's literally the entire point. Because if we don't agree on reality, this is just like arguing with a flat earther. I say, well, no, we know that the earth isn't flat because the sun dips below the horizon, which is caused by the curvature of the earth. And they say, no, that's not how it works. Light bends, and the laws of physics and gravity, that's just made up. That's part of the simulation or whatever. And the sun dips because it gets like farther away. We live in a completely different reality. And as I said, there is no fruit that will come from this conversation. I mean, there just isn't.
If you feel that way, I respect that. But the fossils cannot be used as proof for evolution.
Yes, they absolutely can. Because again, there are predictions. What scientific models do, or what scientific ideas do, is they make predictions, and then we look for the evidence that confirms them. For example, Charles Darwin knew that birds and certain lines of dinosaurs had incredible similarities in their skeletons. And so he said, well, we should find an animal that is basically a chimera, a hybrid of the two, a so-called transitional fossil or whatever. And lo and behold, like 18 months after On the Origin of Species was found, we found Archaeopteryx, which we don't really know if it was a dinosaur or a bird because it is so incredibly blended between the two. It has a toothy snout, not a beak. Birds don't have snouts or teeth, but this one does. But it could clearly fly. It had the asymmetrical flight feathers, but it also had a really long tailbone, which birds don't have. It was, like I said, it's literally a chimera. It's a mix between a theropod dinosaur and a bird. So that's what the theory predicted, and that's exactly what came out. And then as we looked, we said, well, humans, like, what makes humans different from apes? Well, we have much larger brain cases, an upright posture, a different pelvic girdle. Our chests are more barrel-shaped instead of pyramid-shaped. And then, lo and behold, we have found thousands upon thousands of very close relatives to us whose, the farther back you go, the smaller their brain cases are, and they gradually get larger. The posture changes, the hip structure changes, the rib cage changes, and it matches perfectly with the older ones are the more primitive, and the more recent ones are the more highly derived. So all the predictions keep coming true. That's how we know that the fossil record is evidence.
So you take some bones and fossils into a courtroom.
Millions upon millions of them.
Sure. Take as many as you want. You take them into a courtroom and you say, Judge, these creatures, these fossils that we have discovered are the ancestors of such and such. You will be laughed out of the courtroom because you cannot prove...
That's not what courtrooms are for.
You cannot prove that those fossils and those organisms had any offspring.
I have explained this to you 5 times now. It doesn't matter if the particular dead one that you found had any offspring. This is just, I could do a genetic test. We could find a mummy, and we could do a genetic test of it and find out if somebody in the present day is related to it. Does that mean that that mummy is actually their great-great-great-great-grandpa? No, they could be related to them in a different way. It doesn't matter if that dead organism did or did not reproduce. It's part of a population. The populations reproduce. The gene pool within the population undergoes changes over time. I'm not going to explain it a 6th time, but that is the actual answer. You keep saying it, and you're totally wrong about the way you understand that.
Okay, I'll make one more statement, and then you can kick me off. So, and then I got to go. So, evolution teaches that organisms change and evolve over time.
Yes.
Creatures are born, creatures evolve, organisms evolve, they have offspring, and those offspring evolve and change and develop over time.
The population changes. You're thinking about, like, evolutionary scientists think that one day an animal gives birth and the offspring is so incredibly different that we say it evolved, and that's just not the case.
No, I'm not saying that. So over time, millions and billions of years, single-celled organisms reproduced, and over time, however much time you want, they produced different, changing, evolving offspring, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. When you find bones in the ground, you do not know if those bones in the ground had different offspring. You don't know that. I'm going to leave you with that. The fossil record is not proof. You don't know if they had different offspring. I got to go.
I have one question though for you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
What would proof of evolution look like? And don't say we would see mice being born with wings all of a sudden, because every scientist will tell you that evolution occurs over incredibly long periods of time. So what would the evidence look like if these fossils can't possibly be it? And the genetic record, we never talked about that. But just tell me, what would the evidence look like?
Evidence of change and evolving organisms over millions and billions of years.
Yeah, what would that evidence look like then?
The evidence would be an incredibly large amount of information proving that over generations and generations upon mass amount of information that this creature produced this creature which evolved this much, and this creature produced this creature which evolved this much, and this creature it's just endless.
You just described the fossil record.
No.
Yes, you did.
No, I did not.
Yes, you did.
No, fossil. You can't prove that a fossil had different offspring. You can't prove that. All you know is when you find a fossil in the ground, the only thing that you know for sure is that it was born and it died. You cannot prove that it had babies, and you can't prove that it had different babies for sure.
Then how come there are so many extinct organisms? If the fossils aren't proof that the organisms were different in the past, then how come the vast majority of all fossils we find are of extinct organisms?
There was a creature that existed, and it died. It was extinct. Saber-tooth animals go extinct. They hunt. Man has hunted them, and eventually species go extinct. Because just like the Bible says, I know you don't believe the Bible, but the Bible says
I don't believe it's scientific.
That animals produce after their kind. Dogs produce dogs, and elephants produce elephants.
It doesn't say that.
And that's what we see. The Bible lines up with what we observe and what we can.
Yeah, you can't observe directly millions of years of change right before your eye, but the evidence, if evolution were true, then there would be evidence, and that's what the fossil record is. There's literally no other possible type of evidence except the dead remains of those organisms from the past. That's what the fossil record is. And, you're just in denial of that.
The fossil record is bones in the ground, and that proves that there was a life form and that it died.
Yeah, and the life forms in the past are different from the ones of today, but all organisms today are descendants of organisms from the past, and the organisms from the past are different. Ergo, we are evolved forms. Those are our ancestors in the past.
No, you cannot say that bones
yes,
in the
you
ground.
Can.
No, you can't. You cannot prove that bones in the ground had babies. You can only say that these bones that I found lived and died. You cannot prove that it had an offspring.
Why don't you understand this? The fact that they exist proves that they had parents,
but not babies.
if an organism is produced from parents, then parents produce offspring. Then, I mean, for crying out loud.
You can't prove that bones had babies, and much less different babies. I gotta let you go. You can't use fossils as proof for evolution.
Yes, you can, because that is what the proof would be. I mean, you admitted it. You without saying the words fossil record, you explained the fossil record as the proof, because I asked you what it would be, and you perfectly described it. Bravo to you, but what you described was the fossil record.
The fossil record is a record of
Goodbye.
bones. Goodbye. All right, bye.